Was Cyrus's success purely strategic, or did he have help from within, perhaps even spiritual support from disgruntled priests? Did the people of Babylon truly welcome him, or were they bewitched by his promises and religious tolerance? Was Nabonidus simply an inept ruler, or a man who had seen too much, something that made him detached from earthly concerns? In this moment of collapse, we see a rare convergence of realpolitik, religion, and myth. Babylon didn't fall with a sword, it fell with a whisper, a shift of loyalties, and perhaps, a cosmic alignment. Cyrus enters Babylon, a new world order. On October 29, 539 BC, Cyrus entered Babylon. There was no resistance, no revolt, no bloodbath. He paid homage to Marduk, restored the temples Nabonidus had neglected, and freed captive peoples, including the Jews, whom he allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. It was the beginning of a new empire, the Achaemenid dynasty, and the end of Mesopotamian supremacy. But something else happened, something rarely mentioned. Cyrus's scribes immediately began rewriting history. Nabonidus was labeled a heretic, a madman, and a traitor to the gods. His 17-year reign was painted as a dark age, an interruption in divine order. But what if the truth was far more complicated? The death of a civilization, and its secrets. The fall of Babylon marked more than a political change. It was the end of the Mesopotamian era, the culture that invented writing, astronomy, and empire itself. But with its fall, knowledge was lost, scrolls burned, temples looted, histories reinterpreted. Whatever secrets Nabonidus had discovered in Tema vanished with him. Or were they hidden? Historically, there's debate over whether Belshazzar died during the fall or survived temporarily. But the psychological impact of this story has endured for centuries, a warning of hubris, ignored omens, and divine retribution. Where was Nabonidus? Nabonidus was not in the city that night. According to the Nabonidus Chronicle, he had returned from Tema but was staying in a different location, perhaps Borsippa or Sippar. When Cyrus's forces took Babylon, Nabonidus fled. He was captured shortly afterward, reportedly without a fight. Unlike many fallen kings, he wasn't executed. Instead, he was exiled, possibly to Iran, where he lived out his days in quiet disgrace. Why did Cyrus spare him? Some scholars believe Cyrus saw value in humiliating but not martyring the Babylonian king. Others suggest that Nabonidus, now viewed as mad and powerless, no longer posed any threat. But there are more mysterious interpretations. A cosmic exchange, was this prophesied? In the lore surrounding Nabonidus, a question lingers: did he see this coming? During his stay in Tema, he spent years observing celestial movements, recording eclipses, comets, and strange alignments. Some later texts claim he predicted the fall of Babylon but believed he could avert it by pleasing Sin, the moon god. Others believe his obsession with the moon was a coded form of prophecy, that he had received some kind of extraterrestrial vision, and the fall of Babylon was part of a preordained cycle. This theory, fringe though it may be, has drawn increasing attention from mystery scholars. Why did Nabonidus choose exile in the desert over defending the greatest city on earth? What did he learn, or encounter, in Tema that changed him so profoundly? A peaceful takeover or supernatural coup? The mystery of Babylon's bloodless fall has opened the door to countless interpretations. In the chronicles of ancient empires, few collapses are as mysterious, and eerily smooth, as the fall of Babylon in 539 BC. No great battle, no weeks-long siege, no dramatic breach of walls. Just silence. A capital city, the heart of a civilization, fell without a fight. How? This is the moment where the story of Nabonidus turns from a tale of arrogance to one of supernatural intrigue and political genius. The Euphrates Gambit, Cyrus's secret strategy. Cyrus the Great was no ordinary conqueror. While Babylon fortified itself, trusting in its massive defensive walls, Cyrus was planning something else entirely. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, Cyrus's army diverted the Euphrates River, the life artery that ran directly through the city. By doing this, he lowered the river's level just enough so his soldiers could march through the dry riverbed, under Babylon's defenses. It wasn't just clever, it was unprecedented. But was this version true? The Cyrus Cylinder, one of the earliest known pieces of political propaganda, offers a slightly different account. It claims the people of Babylon welcomed him as a liberator, with no resistance at all. The priests, alienated by Nabonidus's religious reforms, may have even opened the gates to Cyrus willingly. Whatever the truth, Babylon fell in a single night, not to battle, but to betrayal. The night of the fall, Belshazzar's feast. Legend and biblical sources place Belshazzar at the center of this night. In the book of Daniel, there is a vivid account of the king holding a grand feast inside the palace while Cyrus's forces advanced. During the feast, a mysterious hand appears and writes glowing words on the wall. Emi, tekel aparsin. Daniel, the prophet, interprets the words. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. That very night, according to the biblical text, Belshazzar is slain. The omens of collapse. Back in Tama, Nabonidus remained strangely detached. According to the Nabonidus Chronicle, he offered sacrifices, built temples, and issued religious decrees, but failed to prepare for the Persian threat. When news reached him of Cyrus's victories, he dismissed them. He seemed to believe that Sin, the moon god, would protect him. But across the empire, signs of collapse were mounting. Governors reported skirmishes along the eastern frontiers. Merchants complained of Persian patrols disrupting caravans. Temple treasuries reported looting or seizure by Persian forces. Sacred divinations, based on star readings, warned of a coming disaster. Still, Nabonidus remained focused on the stars. The calm before the storm. By 540 BC, Cyrus had conquered all of Mesopotamia's eastern neighbors. Only Babylon stood in his way. But Babylon was no easy target. Its walls were legendary, over 80 feet thick and high, with bronze gates and fortified bridges over the Euphrates. Its food stores were stocked to withstand years of siege. And the city was protected by a wide moat system. Yet Cyrus didn't plan to attack the city head-on. He planned something else, something much smarter. Meanwhile, Nabonidus, now alarmed by the crumbling situation, finally returned to Babylon. But it was too late. His absence had shattered trust. His religious reforms had alienated the people. And his son, Belshazzar, had failed to rally the army. Nabonidus returned to a city that was no longer truly his. Babylon's weakening grip. With Nabonidus in self-imposed exile and Belshazzar acting as co-regent, Babylon's internal politics began to decay. The priesthood resented Nabonidus's obsession with sin and his absence from the capital. Belshazzar, meanwhile, alienated key allies with heavy taxation and inconsistent rule. Babylon's reputation as the world's superpower was weakening. Many of the empire's border territories, once fiercely loyal to Babylon, began to quietly shift allegiance to Persia. Trade routes that once flowed freely to Babylon were diverted. Provincial governors in regions like Syria, Phoenicia, and Anatolia started sending envoys to Cyrus. Even in Babylon itself, discontent was brewing. Some elites whispered that maybe a Persian conquest wouldn't be such a bad thing, especially if Cyrus promised to restore Marduk and end Nabonidus's heretical policies. The Marduk factor, religious betrayal. One of the biggest blunders of Nabonidus's reign was turning against Marduk, Babylon's chief god. While he worshipped Sin in Tama, he neglected the Akita festival, the New Year celebration where the king was supposed to bow before Marduk and be ritually reaffirmed. This wasn't just a missed ceremony. It was viewed as a cosmic betrayal, a sign that Nabonidus no longer had the god's favor. In a society where religion and politics were inseparable, this amounted to spiritual treason. The priesthood of Marduk, once loyal to the Babylonian monarchy, began turning against the crown. Cyrus took notice. In his inscriptions, including the famous Cyrus Cylinder, he later claimed that Marduk himself had chosen him to overthrow Nabonidus and restore order to Babylon. Whether or not this was true, it worked brilliantly. Cyrus wasn't just coming as a conqueror. He was presenting himself as a divinely chosen liberator. The isolation of power. While Nabonidus was in Tama, his empire was not leaderless. He appointed his son, Belshazzar, as co-regent in Babylon. But the separation between king and court sowed deeper divisions. Babylonian elites felt abandoned. Religious tensions worsened. And Belshazzar, though competent, lacked the charisma and authority to hold the empire together. While Nabonidus meditated beneath the moon in Tama, a new power was quietly rising in the east, a force that would reshape the entire ancient world. His name was Cyrus II, better known to history as Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire. And he was about to become Nabonidus's greatest nightmare. A new kind of king. Cyrus was no ordinary warlord. He was charismatic, brilliant in strategy, and deeply pragmatic. Born into Persian nobility but raised under Median overlords, Cyrus staged a revolution around 550 BC that overthrew his Median rulers and united the fragmented Iranian plateau. But Cyrus didn't stop there. In just a few short years, he conquered Lydia in the west, parts of Central Asia to the northeast, and Elam, Babylon's old rival, in the south. He wasn't just creating a kingdom. He was assembling an empire, one more centralized, more efficient, and far more tolerant than Babylon had ever been. And as he expanded, Cyrus didn't rule through fear alone. He positioned himself as a liberator, a restorer of order and justice. Wherever he went, he respected local religions, restored temples, and freed enslaved peoples. In a time of brutal conquest, this was revolutionary. His propaganda was subtle, and it worked. Cyrus wasn't just marching westward. He was winning hearts and minds, including some within Babylon. The strange artifacts of Tama. Archaeological excavations in Tama over the past century have unearthed several oddities that defy traditional interpretations. Among them, limestone tablets with inscriptions referencing messengers from the sky and those whose light walks the sand. Carvings of non-human figures with elongated heads, surrounded by starbursts and spiral motifs, eerily similar to petroglyphs found in disparate parts of the ancient world, from Peru to Mesopotamia. Unusual alignments in Tama's temple structures, particularly one dedicated to Sin, that appear to sync with lunar eclipses and rare celestial events, like the appearance of Sirius or the precession of the equinoxes. Could Nabonidus have been seeking contact with extraterrestrial intelligences, interpreting Sin not just as a moon god, but as a representation of a powerful non-human force? Was Tama a proto-observatory, or even a kind of portal site? Astronomical inscription or alien communication? One particularly controversial tablet, partially translated and stored at the Museum of the Ancient Near East in Berlin, contains references to a light that speaks and a voice within the moon. Scholars traditionally interpret this as metaphorical language, poetic hymns to Sin. But alternative researchers argue that it might refer to actual contact, some sort of transmission or visual encounter in the night sky that Nabonidus believed was divine. The text reads in part, "From the silver dome above, a voice shimmered down upon the sand. It knew my name before I was king. It opened my eyes and sealed my sleep. The watchers of Uar cannot see what I see." Was this a mystical vision? A delusion? Or something more literal? As Babylon simmered with religious tension and political disquiet, Nabonidus made a decision that defied every royal tradition before him. He left the city. But this wasn't just a brief hunting trip or a royal inspection of distant provinces. Nabonidus departed Babylon for nearly a decade and relocated his court to a remote desert city, Tama, in present-day Saudi Arabia. Why Tama? Tama was an oasis city, thriving on trade routes that stretched between Arabia, Mesopotamia, and even Egypt. It was known for its deep wells, moon worship, and a mixture of cultures that made it unlike any other city in the Babylonian Empire. But more importantly, Tama was also associated with Sin, the moon god, the deity Nabonidus had controversially elevated above Marduk. By settling in Tama, Nabonidus could practice his unorthodox religious vision in peace, far from the angry priests of Babylon and their entrenched Marduk cult. But this move has mystified historians for centuries. What would compel the king of the world's most powerful city to abandon his capital and reign from a desert outpost? Was it religious exile, or something else? Some scholars interpret this move as self-imposed exile, a spiritual journey, perhaps, to commune more deeply with sin or avoid civil war. Others see it as a strategic retreat to distance himself from a crumbling Babylon and protect himself from assassination. But an alternative theory, whispered in fringe historical circles and embedded in esoteric texts, suggests something far stranger. Nabonidus was in Tema not to worship sin, but to communicate with something else entirely. This theory proposes that Tema, with its unpolluted skies and unique geologic features, was a hotspot of celestial activity. Its geographic location made it ideal for observing the stars, and potentially receiving messages. Could his worship of sin be part of a longer cosmic tradition, hidden and distorted through centuries of mythology? A kingdom divided. While Nabonidus worshipped sin with all his might, the people of Babylon were growing restless. Priests saw their authority undermined, soldiers felt neglected, and provinces began to grumble. The king's fixation on a celestial deity over the city's protector god was tearing the empire apart from within. Behind closed temple doors, Babylonian elites whispered, "Our king no longer serves the gods of earth, but the lords of the stars." Whether sin was a real divine power, a hallucination, or something else entirely, the political implications were catastrophic. Nabonidus's kingdom was spiraling into disorder. But he wasn't done yet. He would soon make a decision that would further estrange him from Babylon, and take him far away, into the burning deserts of Arabia, in search of answers only sin could provide. When Nabonidus openly shifted his devotion from Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, to Sin, the ancient Mesopotamian moon god, it wasn't just a religious reorientation. It was a political and cosmic rebellion that sent shockwaves through the heart of the empire. But why Sin? Why the moon? Why now? Babylonians had always honored Sin, but no king before Nabonidus had ever elevated him above Marduk. To do so was sacrilegious, bordering on treason against the city's divine protector. To understand this dangerous shift, we must dive deep into the mythology and ancient worship of Sin, and the strange revelations that seem to drive Nabonidus beyond reason. The face in the moon. Sin, also known as Nana in Sumerian lore, was not merely a celestial body to ancient Mesopotamians. He was considered a deity of wisdom, secrets, and hidden knowledge, attributes traditionally associated with forbidden power. He was worshipped primarily in Ur, the ancient Sumerian city, and Haran, in northern Mesopotamia. Nabonidus's mother, Adigupi, was a high priestess in Haran, a lifelong devotee of Sin. Some scholars believe her influence seeded Nabonidus's obsession from childhood. But there was more. In surviving cuneiform inscriptions, Nabonidus claimed that Sin spoke to him in dreams, commanding him to rebuild temples and spread his worship across the empire. Dreams were important in ancient times, believed to be messages from the divine realm. But for a king to act solely based on them, in defiance of his people's traditions, was alarming. What did he see in those dreams? Some fringe researchers propose that Nabonidus's dreams weren't dreams at all, but encounters. In one recovered tablet, Nabonidus writes, "Sin, the Lord of heaven, approached me in the visions of the night. His form shone like the moon, and he delivered words not of man." A visitor, something advanced, for a deity? A cosmic heresy? With each year of his reign, Nabonidus drifted further from Babylonian orthodoxy. He began building new temples not to Marduk, but to Sin, in remote locations like Haran and Tema, places with histories of strange astronomical worship and forgotten gods. In doing so, he angered not only the priests, but the very fabric of Babylonian society. Festivals were cancelled. Holy rituals were left unperformed. To many citizens, this was sacrilege. To others, it was prophecy. A text from the Dead Sea Scrolls, allegedly inspired by Chaldean priests, speaks of a king who shall turn to the moon and open a gate in the sky. Though not explicitly tied to Nabonidus, The description is hauntingly close. Was he simply mad, or onto something terrifyingly real? The Babylonians split. By the midpoint of Nabonidus's rule, Babylon was no longer united. Nobles plotted. Priests cursed his name in secret rites. And common people whispered of omens, dying cattle, poisoned rivers, and celestial lights that appeared and vanished over the city. Even the military began to fracture, unsure whether to support the king or the high priests. Babylon wasn't just at risk of civil war. It was at risk of cosmic collapse, at least in the minds of those who believed the gods had abandoned them. Signs of shift, the rise of unorthodox beliefs. In the decade before Nabonidus's rule, there were strange signs in the skies. Multiple eclipses, rare planetary alignments, and what one Babylonian tablet describes as a black star that moved like a bird through the sky. Were these meteors? Comets? Or something else? Some priests began murmuring that the old gods were growing silent. Others believed a new force was entering the Babylonian spiritual landscape, one that did not answer to Marduk, Ishtar, or Enlil. And then came Nabonidus. Nabonidus's rise, a break in tradition. Nabonidus wasn't supposed to be king. He was an outsider to the royal bloodline, a usurper to many. Some say he was placed on the throne by powerful allies. Others believe it was a cosmic event, a prophecy fulfilled. What is clear is that Nabonidus was different. He was a dreamer, a mystic, and some would even say, a madman. From his first days as king, he defied the temple elite. He questioned the supremacy of Marduk, publicly promoted the moon god Sin, a deity long neglected in Babylon, and began redistributing temple wealth. This wasn't just politics, it was war on the sacred order. The priesthood was furious. Nobles were uneasy. But Nabonidus didn't care. Because he was searching for something. Celestial curiosity or forbidden knowledge? According to the Nabonidus Chronicle, one of the few surviving documents from his reign, he spent nights in isolation watching the sky, interpreting dreams, and claiming to receive messages from beings not of this world. In one passage he refers to the watchers who dwell in fire, but speak in wind. Some historians dismiss this as poetry. Others aren't so sure. Modern-day theorists, especially those who connect ancient civilizations to extraterrestrial theories, believe Nabonidus may have encountered something beyond our understanding. The way he spoke of Sin was not as a god of tradition but as a light-bringer from the far heavens. Did he mistake? The jewel of the ancient world. Long before Nabonidus took the throne, Babylon was the glowing center of the ancient world. With its ziggurats towering like stairways to the stars and its gleaming walls stretching over 50 miles, the city was a masterpiece of human ambition and divine arrogance. It wasn't just a political capital, it was the beating heart of Mesopotamian civilization, rich in science, religion, and mystery. People traveled from distant lands just to witness the legendary Hanging Gardens, debate with scholars in temples, and offer sacrifices to Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon. But beneath this glorious exterior, something darker brewed, cracks in the walls of faith, knowledge, and control. Babylon stood on the crossroads of mystery. The Euphrates River, flowing through its center, wasn't just a water source. It was believed to be a divine artery, connecting the heavens with the earth. Ancient inscriptions speak of gods descending upon the riverbanks in glowing chariots. What did these ancients witness? Lights? Entities? Were these metaphors, or memories of something real? The keepers of cosmic order, the priestly class. At the center of Babylonian power was not the king, but the priesthood, especially the high priests of Marduk. These priests didn't just perform rituals. They were mathematicians, astronomers, historians, and gatekeepers of sacred knowledge passed down from Sumerian times, perhaps even earlier. They tracked the movements of planets with eerie precision. The ancient Enuma Anu Enlil, a 7th century BC cuneiform tablet, catalogued eclipses, comets, and celestial alignments as omens. These weren't just superstitions, they were warning systems. The priests believed that events in the heavens directly influenced human fate. And they guarded this knowledge fiercely. To them, Any deviation from tradition, any heresy, was not just an offense to Marduk but a disruption of cosmic harmony. Did he really see the moon as a divine messenger, or something else? The priesthood in Babylon wasn't just a religious class, it was a political powerhouse. The moment Nabonidus began shifting religious focus from Marduk to Sin, he triggered a slow-burning crisis. Temples in Babylon refused to cooperate. The annual New Year festival, crucial for reinforcing royal power, was disrupted. For 10 years of his reign, Nabonidus didn't even live in Babylon. Instead, he went into a mysterious self-imposed exile in Tama, a remote Arabian city far from the heart of Mesopotamia. Why? His official reason was the restoration of forgotten temples to Sin, but many believe it was a strategic or spiritual escape, or perhaps something darker. Was he simply fleeing internal political tensions? Or was he on a mission to uncover lost knowledge? This journey, his exile to Tama, is where the true mystery begins to unfold. He began neglecting the worship of Marduk, the city's most important god. He reinstated and elevated Sin, a deity long considered secondary or regional. He refused to attend the Akita festival, a sacred New Year ceremony central to royal legitimacy. These actions alienated him from the priests, the elites, and even the common people. But why would a king do this? Was he acting out of arrogance? Or was there something deeper? Some ancient texts and modern researchers believe Nabonidus may have uncovered something, ancient writings or artifacts, that convinced him the traditional gods were false or incomplete. There are Babylonian tablets from his reign which claim he restored ancient temples not just as a matter of piety, but to fulfill inscriptions from long ago. It appears Nabonidus wasn't just trying to worship Sin. He believed that the knowledge of the distant past held truths more powerful than Babylon's present. Sin, known to the Sumerians as Nana, was an ancient lunar deity. His main centers of worship were in Ur and Haran. Unlike Marduk, who symbolized war and justice, Sin represented mystery, cycles, time, and most notably, the celestial order. His symbol was a crescent moon, a shape that echoed in many of the ziggurats and temples built under Nabonidus. Historians today debate, was Nabonidus simply more spiritually connected to Sin because of his mother's influence, or did he believe Sin was not merely a god, but a being of immense cosmic intelligence? In one tablet, Nabonidus wrote, "When I beheld the vision of Sin in a dream, the moon came close to the earth and spoke to me." It was not of this world. When Nabonidus stepped into the role of king in 556 BC, few could have predicted how controversial and mysterious his reign would become. Unlike the kings before him, Nabonidus wasn't a traditional choice. He was not the son of the previous king, nor a warrior prince born of divine right. Instead, he was a scholar, a priest, and a man obsessed with the ancient past, especially the worship of the moon god Sin. At the time, Babylon was one of the most powerful cities in the ancient world. A shining jewel of Mesopotamia, it boasted the Hanging Gardens, towering ziggurats, and a priesthood deeply tied to the worship of Marduk, the chief god of the city. For centuries, kings had paid homage to Marduk, maintaining peace with the priests and ensuring divine legitimacy in the eyes of the people. But Nabonidus had other ideas. He didn't just accept his role, he disrupted everything it meant to be a Babylonian king. Even Nabonidus's origins are debated. Most historians agree he was likely of noble birth, perhaps connected to the Assyrian or Aramean elites. His mother, Adagap, claimed divine visions and was a priestess devoted to Sin, the moon god of Haran. Her influence on Nabonidus would prove immense. Some ancient inscriptions even suggest that Adagap prophesied her son's rise, through dreams she claimed were sent from the gods. Many scholars believe that Nabonidus ascended to the throne following a violent palace coup. The previous king, Labashi-Marduk, reigned only for a few months before being overthrown, possibly assassinated by powerful officials. Nabonidus, with strong religious ties and the backing of some priestly factions, took the crown. He wasn't a young warrior prince, he was already in his 50s. Yet his vision for Babylon would change everything. Instead of continuing the political and religious traditions of his predecessors, Nabonidus launched a campaign that shocked Babylon's priesthood. Ancient texts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and Babylonian Chronicles, described Tema as a city of secrets. Archaeologists have found strange temples, star maps, and even pre-Islamic inscriptions referring to Sin and other possibly unknown celestial figures. It was in Tema that Nabonidus allegedly had visions, or encounters, that historians still cannot explain. Some modern theorists believe Nabonidus might have been in contact with something, not divine in the religious sense, but something cosmic. He wrote about strange dreams in which the gods told him secrets about the heavens. He built observatories, obsessed over lunar cycles, and recorded astronomical data with unusual precision. Several cuneiform tablets found near Tema show spirals, non-Babylonian symbols, and star alignments not typically recorded in Mesopotamian texts. Some even suggest a mathematical system that surpasses the known knowledge of the time. Could this be evidence of contact? Or was Nabonidus simply a misunderstood mystic ahead of his time? While Nabonidus roamed the desert and chased lunar gods, Babylon suffered. The priesthood of Marduk began rallying against him. Ordinary citizens were confused, some angry, some afraid. Festivals were cancelled. Temples closed. The sacred rituals that had kept Babylon united were breaking down. And then, the Persians came knocking. Led by the legendary Cyrus the Great, the Persian Empire was on the rise. They claimed to be liberators of oppressed peoples, and the Marduk priests welcomed them. Some historians believe they invited the Persians in, simply to rid themselves of Nabonidus once and for all. By the 6th century BC, Babylon was a shining jewel of the ancient world. Towering ziggurats, sacred temples, bustling marketplaces, and libraries that held thousands of cuneiform tablets. It was a marvel, a city that had already outlasted empires, kings, and prophets. But within this glory, something was rotting. Religious tensions simmered beneath the surface. The priesthood of Marduk, Babylon's supreme god, wielded immense power. Political maneuvering was constant. The once stable empire had started to crack, and into this chaos walked a man named Nabonidus. He was not a warrior king like his predecessors. He was not a man of the people. He was something else, a scholar, a religious fanatic, or perhaps a seeker of truths too dangerous to understand. Nabonidus ascended the throne around 556 BC, but unlike previous kings, he broke Babylonian tradition immediately. Instead of worshipping Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon, Nabonidus began openly favoring Sin, the moon god, a deity associated with shadows, night cycles, and in some interpretations, the unknown. But it wasn't just preference. He shut down temples, dismissed powerful priests, and began reforming state religion, all while claiming visions and dreams led him to these decisions. The Babylonian elite, especially the Marduk priesthood, were horrified. What they didn't know, this was only the beginning. Soon after taking the throne, Nabonidus did the unthinkable. He vanished. He left the capital city and exiled himself to a remote desert town called Tema, in modern-day Saudi Arabia, over 500 miles away from Babylon. And he stayed there for a decade. No other Babylonian king had ever abandoned the empire like this. He left behind his son, Belshazzar, to rule in his absence, a move that would later inspire the biblical writing on the wall story in the book of Daniel. But why Tema? When Babylon fell, the world shifted. But for Nabonidus, the last king of the city that once ruled the known world, the fall marked something else, the disappearance of a man who had dared to defy both the gods and the traditions of empire. Where did he go? And more importantly, what was he trying to protect, or hide, or escape? The mysterious capture. After Babylon was seized in 539 BC, historical records go oddly quiet on Nabonidus. The Nabonidus Chronicle, a Babylonian cuneiform text likely compiled under Persian rule, briefly notes that he was captured in Babylon and taken to exile. But this is vague. It doesn't explain how he was captured, or by whom. Some fringe accounts even suggest he surrendered willingly, as if he expected it, or perhaps even planned it. Why such ambiguity? Why wouldn't the Persians boast more publicly about conquering the last Babylonian monarch? One answer may lie in how Cyrus the Great chose to handle defeated kings. Cyrus's policy of tolerance, or calculation. Cyrus was known as a liberator, not a butcher. His empire was built on the backs of integrated governance, allowing local religions, elites, and traditions to continue in exchange for loyalty. In Nabonidus's case, there was likely no political benefit to executing him. He was already alienated from the priests, disliked by the elite, and distant from the people. But what if his real crime wasn't political? It was spiritual. The Babylonian priesthood considered Nabonidus a blasphemer for favoring Sin, the moon god, over Marduk. He had disrupted festivals, closed temples, and withdrawn sacred relics. To the clergy, he had broken the cosmic order, and his exile may have been not just punishment, but containment. Where was Nabonidus taken? Some sources suggest Nabonidus was exiled to a region in modern-day Iran, possibly in a quiet court under Persian supervision. But then there's the Dead Sea Scrolls. In one of the lesser-known Aramaic texts, the Prayer of Nabonidus, we find a peculiar account, a king afflicted with a skin disease, who wandered the desert for 7 years, until a Jewish prophet healed him by invoking the name of God. While this echoes the story of King Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible's Book of Daniel, many scholars believe it was actually about Nabonidus, that two stories may have been merged or confused over time. If true, this would suggest Nabonidus continued to wander, a sick and broken man, wrestling not only with political defeat, but with something spiritual, or even supernatural. Tema's shadow, what did he leave behind? The ruins of Tema, the Arabian oasis where Nabonidus spent a decade, remain largely unexcavated. But what we know is both tantalizing and disturbing. Massive stone walls, unlike typical Babylonian architecture. Strange inscriptions mixing Babylonian, Aramaic, and unknown symbols. Accounts of lunar rituals, perhaps even human sacrifices. Why was Nabonidus obsessed with the moon? One theory suggests he believed that Sin, the moon god, was an ancient power older than all Mesopotamian deities, perhaps even alien in origin. He wasn't worshipping Sin, he was communing with it. Fringe archaeologists, inspired by Zecharia Sitchin's ancient astronaut theories, argue that Nabonidus discovered non-human artifacts in Tema, which caused his break with tradition, and possibly his mental breakdown. If that's true, then his exile was more than political. It was containment, of a man who knew too much. Nabonidus may have spent his final years in relative peace, but legends suggest otherwise. There are folk tales from Persian and Arabian regions about a moon-worshipping foreigner who lived alone in the hills, drawing star maps in the dirt and warning villagers of the sky god's return. While these may be mythic echoes, they raise an important question. Was Nabonidus a madman, or a messenger? In a stone tablet fragment recovered in Iran, now lost, a line is attributed to him. They came not from the east or west, nor from below. They came from above, in lightless fire. I bowed to them not as gods, but as witnesses. If this tablet was real, it would imply that Nabonidus believed in beings from beyond the stars, and that he had seen them. Was he silenced? The Persian regime wasted no time in rewriting Babylon's past. Nabonidus was officially denounced as a usurper, his inscriptions destroyed, his reforms reversed. The Cyrus Cylinder claimed that Cyrus was chosen by Marduk himself to restore order. But some whisper that this wasn't about religion, it was about erasing knowledge. Knowledge that Nabonidus had uncovered in Tema, or perhaps in ancient Babylonian texts long buried beneath the ziggurats. If true, then the real threat Nabonidus posed wasn't to the empire, it was to reality itself. When a kingdom falls, its temples burn, its palaces collapse, and its kings vanish. But ideas, especially dangerous ideas, sometimes survive the flames. What did Nabonidus know that made him a threat not just to his enemies, but to history itself? In this section, we dive into the lost texts, strange symbols, and ancient codes tied to Nabonidus, and what they may reveal about his obsession, his madness, and perhaps, his message to the future. The Lunar Library of Tema. In the deserts of northwestern Arabia lies Tema, a forgotten oasis once ruled by Nabonidus. He abandoned Babylon for a decade to reside here, a decision historians still find baffling. Why would the ruler of the world's most powerful empire trade a throne for the sand? Archaeological digs in Tama, many of them restricted or barely published, reveal strange architecture and inscriptions. Moon-centric ritual chambers, unlike any in Mesopotamia. Tablets mentioning the Watchers of Night, a phrase not found elsewhere in Babylonian references to something called Edemenubalatu, translated loosely as the Stair of Eternal Light. Were these just religious metaphors? Or were they something more? Some theorists believe Nabonidus was building a repository of secret knowledge, guarded in Tama's deep caverns, scrolls that could rewrite history. A scroll that shouldn't exist. In 1962, an antique dealer in Damascus allegedly sold a scroll made of palm bark, sealed in wax and written in a hybrid of Akkadian and Proto-Aramaic. Its origin? Claimed to be from Tama. Scholars who examined it, before it disappeared into a private collection, noted charts of the moon's phases, along with binary-like patterns not typical of ancient astronomy. Repeated references to a being named Enlilzu, described as one who descends without form, veiled in silver, whose voice is numbers. A final passage. Let not the priests see this. Let not the kings read this. This is for those who come when the stars move backward. That single line sent shockwaves through fringe circles. What did "when the stars move backward" mean? A celestial alignment? A return? And most of all, why was Nabonidus writing in code? Nabonidus is often dismissed as a spiritual eccentric, but cuneiform texts attributed to his reign show something shocking, a level of astronomical precision centuries ahead of his time. He commissioned observatories to record lunar eclipses to the second. A recovered tablet from Sippar bears a 17-digit value of pi, hundreds of years before the Greeks. In Tama, star maps were found etched into stone not with traditional Sumerian constellations, but with patterns resembling spiral galaxies. Why? Why was the last king of Babylon so obsessed with space, time, and the moon? Some researchers propose that he believed the gods were not deities, but visitors from the sky, and that their messages were hidden not in rituals, but in numbers. Babylon had no shortage of religious texts, many of which were strictly guarded by the temple elites. The Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and hundreds of astrological treatises. But among these were texts considered too dangerous, too heretical to copy. One such lost book was the Tablet of the Veiled One, said to be written in Nabonidus's time, possibly under his patronage. Descriptions say it contained cosmic origin myths with no mention of the gods Marduk or Enlil. References to seed-bearers from the depth, who taught men to shape metal with light. A chilling warning. They shall return when mankind forgets their names. And he who remembers shall be torn between worlds. This tablet was burned during the Persian conquest, at least officially. But fragments in a private museum in Qatar, labeled anonymously, bear nearly identical glyphs. Who saved them? And more importantly, why are they still being hidden? The Temple of Moon and Fire. According to Arab legends passed down near Tama, there was once a temple where the moon turned to fire, a place no one dared enter after Nabonidus vanished. Local Bedouins speak of staircases carved into solid rock that descend for miles beneath the desert. Mirrored walls that reflect no image. A room of voices, where whispers echo in forgotten languages. Though no official excavation has ever confirmed these claims, one 2008 geological survey showed unusual magnetic interference below Tama, similar to that found near meteor impact craters. Was this temple real? And if so, what did Nabonidus build, or find, there? A king of two realms. Traditional records paint Nabonidus as a failure, dethroned, exiled, and forgotten. But these scrolls, symbols, and oral legends suggest another possibility. He wasn't just ruling Babylon. He was trying to unlock a higher realm, a cosmic kingdom that connected the stars to the soul, numbers to prophecy, and perhaps man to beings far older than history. secrets buried in the dust. To this day, much of Tema remains unexcavated. Political instability, religious concerns, and covert foreign interests have all delayed serious archaeological work. But scattered around museums, vaults, and university archives are whispers of what may still lie below. Sealed scrolls that shimmer under ultraviolet light. Clay tablets that sing at specific sound frequencies. Symbols that match not just Babylonian glyphs, but markings found at Neolithic sites in Britain, and even on Mayan stelae. How can that be? What did Nabonidus uncover, and who else knew? Imagine standing in the heart of the Arabian desert, wind carving through stone, sand whispering over ancient ruins. There is no sound, no movement, and yet you feel watched. In Tema, silence speaks. And for those who have dared to explore its forbidden zones, that silence has a voice. This section unravels what many believe today, that the moon temples built, or discovered, by Nabonidus are not dormant. They may still be active, in ways that defy explanation. Modern-day explorers and paranormal warnings. In 2013, a private expedition funded by an anonymous European foundation attempted to map uncharted tunnels beneath Tema. The lead geologist, Dr. Lena Vesper, published a preliminary report online before her research mysteriously vanished. She claimed their equipment repeatedly malfunctioned near certain stone entrances. Underground microphones picked up low-frequency hums, cycling every 28.5 days, matching the lunar cycle. On one visit, her team heard whispers in what sounded like Akkadian, even though no one was speaking. They abandoned the site within 48 hours. The Saudi authorities denied the report's authenticity. But within months, Dr. Vesper left academia and disappeared from public life. Why? Satellite imagery from Google Earth once revealed odd formations near the ancient Tema complex. Stone arrangements in perfect spirals, each exactly 33 meters across. More bizarre, however, are the reports from amateur explorers who used infrared drones and EM field readers in these areas. According to one such explorer's now-deleted blog, certain inscriptions on the stone walls glowed faintly under UV light. Digital devices experienced data bleed. Files became overwritten with strings of ancient cuneiform text. Glyphs from these sites, when traced and converted into binary code, matched patterns found in radio anomalies recorded by NASA near the lunar South Pole. Coincidence? Or a forgotten signal meant to be reactivated? Are the temples a machine? This theory may sound like science fiction, but some researchers believe that Nabonidus didn't just build temples, he reconstructed ancient technology disguised as sacred sites. Consider this: the perfect symmetry of certain temple chambers, the acoustic resonance properties that amplify specific frequencies, the alignment of these structures with lunar perigee points, not just solstices. It's led to one of the most controversial ideas in alternative archaeology. The temples of Tema were built to communicate, not with gods, but with something beyond. If this is true, what was the message? And worse, did someone answer? Since 2004, at least 5 archaeologists and historians connected to Mesopotamian moon cult studies have suddenly ceased publishing or vanished from professional circles. In one case, Dr. Youssef Abdul Halim, an expert on Sabaean lunar rituals, published an article titled, "The Moon Key of Nabonidus." Within days, his personal website was shut down. The article was pulled from multiple journals. His social media profiles were erased. He was last seen giving a guest lecture in Istanbul, then never again. Whistleblowers claim he had photographs of sublunar inscriptions that don't match anything in known Babylonian records. Some say they looked non-human. The Saudi government's silence. Despite decades of archaeological interest, Tema remains one of the least excavated historical sites in the region. And the government's stance? A mixture of restriction, silence, and military presence. In 2021, an independent journalist attempted to film near the supposed site of Nabonidus's moon sanctuary. He was arrested within hours and deported. Why such tight control over an old ruin? Leaked cables suggest that foreign intelligence agencies are also monitoring the area. If true, Tema isn't just a historical curiosity, it's considered a geopolitical asset. But asset of what? Dreams and madness, a pattern through time. Perhaps the strangest reports come not from scientists, but from the people who live nearby. Over the years, dozens of Tema locals have reported recurring dreams of silver-skinned figures descending from a glowing moon. Feelings of being watched from the ruins, especially during full moons. Sudden flashes of ancient memories, of sacrifices, chants, and names they've never learned. One old man, interviewed by a BBC Arabic journalist, claimed, "The Moon Temple speaks. Not with words. With dreams. You see things you should never see." Is this psychological trauma? Or a residual force left behind? The technology nobody understands. Some believe that beneath Tema lies something far older than Babylon, something that Nabonidus didn't build, but rather reactivated. And that he wasn't the first. Similar spiral glyphs and lunar alignments have now been found in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Nabta Playa in Egypt, Tiwanaku in Bolivia, each tied to early stargazing, precise mathematics, and legends of beings who came from the stars. Across cultures, across continents, the same signs. Are they all connected? And if so, by what? By who? After his fall, Nabonidus was erased from tablets, scrolls, and priestly records. But he was not forgotten by everyone. If the moon temples are more than myth, if the glyphs carry messages beyond our world, if dreams are gateways rather than illusions, then the last king of Babylon did something terrifying. He opened something. And we may still be living with the consequences. In ancient Babylon, the heavens were not simply a source of light or mystery, they were sacred texts written across the sky. For Nabonidus, who was already viewed as a mystic king more interested in temples than politics, the stars held deeper meaning. In this section, we explore how Nabonidus's obsession with the cosmos may not have just been spiritual, it might have been something far more radical, an attempt to communicate with something beyond our world. Let's begin in Haran, the desert city where Nabonidus spent over a decade during his self-imposed exile. The ruins suggest this was more than just a temporary seat of power. The ziggurat he restored there was not simply religious, it was aligned with celestial bodies. Archaeoastronomers have noted how certain platforms and doorways of the temple point precisely to major celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of Sirius, a star that held deep significance in both Mesopotamian and Egyptian cultures. Why Sirius? Ancient myths across the world, from Egypt's Sirius-linked goddess Isis to the Dogon tribe's complex astronomical lore, speak of Sirius not just as a star, but as a beacon of the gods. Could Nabonidus have believed it to be the same? In some recovered texts he refers to the great star that brings wisdom, and the light that moves against time. Some believe these phrases are metaphorical. Others, especially fringe researchers, believe they're literal, evidence that Nabonidus thought he could receive messages from extraterrestrial forces via the stars. Here's where things get more bizarre. Babylonian priests, especially those of Marduk, condemned Nabonidus for neglecting their rituals and building strange altars. Some of these new structures, described in later documents, didn't fit any Mesopotamian tradition. They were circular, elevated, and positioned to face specific points in the sky. The implications are clear. Nabonidus wasn't worshipping in the traditional sense. He was performing something else, something closer to a signal transmission or a ritual of contact. An even more chilling piece of evidence comes from the so-called Haran carvings. Unearthed in the 1990s, they depict a humanoid figure with an elongated skull holding a tablet with stars carved into it. Above the figure is what can only be described as a spoke disk, eerily similar to modern depictions of UFOs. Though mainstream scholars dismiss these as symbolic representations of gods, alternative theorists argue they depict beings from the stars, possibly those with whom Nabonidus sought communion. What gives this theory even more fuel is a controversial fragment found in the Dead Sea Scrolls region, though its Babylonian connection remains debated. The text, partially translated, speaks of a king of the old land, who left his throne to seek the watchers of the heights, the shining ones who came not from this land, but from the fire beyond the dome. While this could be poetic metaphor or mistranslation, it mirrors Babylonian mythos in troublingly close ways. So what was Nabonidus doing during those 10 years in Haran? He wasn't just restoring temples. He was watching the sky, mapping it, tracking movements, and perhaps even performing rituals at specific alignments. The strange timing of his returns to Babylon always coincided with solar or lunar eclipses, events Mesopotamians viewed as portals or omens. Could he have believed those were moments when the veil between worlds grew thin? Let's also not forget the eerie precision of Mesopotamian astronomy. Babylonian astronomers were able to predict eclipses and planetary movements centuries before Greek science caught up. Their star catalogs and lunar cycles are so accurate that modern astrophysicists have validated them with current technology. But how did they gain such knowledge? Tradition says it came from the gods. Nabonidus may have taken that literally. Toward the end of his rule, one final construction was planned, an observatory temple hybrid atop the ruins of Ur. However, it was never completed. Cyrus the Great invaded before it could be built. But why an observatory at Ur, a sacred city where Abraham, according to later traditions, once walked? Was Nabonidus hoping to unlock something ancient there, some divine code written in starlight? As we wrap up this section, consider the image of Nabonidus not as a mad king, but as a seeker, a ruler caught between worlds, desperate to decipher a cosmic message. Whether he was a prophet or a deluded mystic, his obsession with the stars left a strange and unforgettable mark on Mesopotamian history. As Nabonidus withdrew deeper into the Arabian desert, his isolation from Babylon's religious mainstream gave birth to whispers of strange rituals and unseen influences. It wasn't just the worship of Sin, the moon god, that troubled his subjects, it was the mystery of what else he might have been worshipping. Local inscriptions and obscure scrolls from Haran speak not only of celestial devotion but of a binding pact, a star covenant. But what exactly was this covenant? Archaeologists unearthed fragmented clay tablets near Tama, written in an unusual dialect, a hybrid of Akkadian and an unknown script. These fragments speak of messengers from the sky, who offered divine insight in exchange for temples untouched by blood, towers pointed at the moon, and offerings under starlight. While these could be metaphors for astrology or divine wisdom, some interpret them literally, as evidence of Nabonidus making contact with non-human entities. Historians from later Persian records described Nabonidus as possessed by a delusion sent from the stars, suggesting his exile wasn't just political, it was a quarantine of dangerous knowledge. Was the last king of Babylon safeguarding his people from a powerful truth, or trying to unleash something far beyond their control? Let's break down what makes this theory so chilling and compelling. 1. The Sky Temples of Tama. Satellite imagery of Tama reveals geometric patterns in ancient structures, concentric circles, star-shaped pathways, and perfectly aligned stone towers. These structures didn't serve typical religious purposes. Many were aligned to constellations visible only in specific times of the year, and some only became visible during astronomical events like lunar eclipses. The question arises, why would a king obsessed with the moon god build facilities aligned to stars far beyond the moon? Some interpret them literally, as evidence of Nabonidus making contact with non-human entities. Historians from later Persian records described Nabonidus as possessed by a delusion sent from the stars, suggesting his exile wasn't just political, it was a quarantine of dangerous knowledge. Was the last king of Babylon safeguarding his people from a powerful truth, or trying to unleash something far beyond their control? Let's break down what makes this theory so chilling and compelling. 1. The Sky Temples of Tama. Satellite imagery of Tama reveals geometric patterns in ancient structures, concentric circles, star-shaped pathways, and perfectly aligned stone towers. These structures didn't serve typical religious purposes. Many were aligned to constellations visible only in specific times of the year, and some only became visible during astronomical events like lunar eclipses. The question arises, why would a king obsessed with the moon god build facilities aligned to stars far beyond the moon? 2. The Lost Hymns of Haran. In 2020, a German research team deciphered fragments of what they called the Hymns to the Wandering Lights. These were poetic praises to beings described not as gods, but as starborn architects, who gifted mankind with timekeeping, mathematics, and the Song of Stone, a cryptic reference that some interpret as vibration or frequency-based technology. These hymns were likely forbidden by the Babylonian priesthood due to their non-traditional theology, hinting that Nabonidus was not just a religious heretic, he was a cosmic revolutionary. Persian scouts and early Islamic chroniclers reported strange occurrences in the ruins of Tema long after Nabonidus disappeared from the historical record. They wrote of strange lights seen above the oasis at night, chanting from the ruins, and blackened stone altars that hummed when the moonlight touched them. While these could be mythic exaggerations, they line up eerily well with modern reports of electromagnetic anomalies in the area, something not easily explained by natural means. Nabonidus's obsession with the moon wasn't just spiritual, it may have been technological. Some believe the ancient towers and temples he built were not just places of worship, but celestial beacons or antennas, meant to communicate with distant entities during specific moon phases. There are references in Nabonidus's own writings about opening the gate when the twin lights meet, likely referring to a rare conjunction of Venus and the moon. These references fueled the theory that he was performing rituals or activations linked to astronomical events. According to an apocryphal Babylonian scroll preserved in fragments at the British Museum, Nabonidus warned his successor not to look beyond the veil when the heavens turn red. Some interpret this as a warning about blood moons or eclipses being a time when the Watchers return. Could it be that this knowledge was dangerous? That his so-called madness was a shield against a cosmic truth too powerful for mankind to bear? As the sun dipped below the horizon in the arid deserts of Tema, a haunting silence fell over the ancient excavation site. What had begun as a routine archaeological dig had transformed into something far more disturbing. The ruins of Nabonidus's temple at Tema were now ground zero for strange and inexplicable occurrences, flickering symbols that danced in torchlight, whispered voices carried by windless air, and eerie sensations that left seasoned researchers too shaken to continue. Dr. Karim Al-Zarif, a respected epigrapher from Cairo University, was among those stationed at the site. A man known for his rational mind and methodical work, Dr. Al-Zarif had always dismissed the supernatural. But during a late-night documentation session deep inside the ruins, he reportedly encountered a phenomenon that would change his beliefs forever. As he translated a wall etching, an unfamiliar dialect resembling Proto-Aramaic, his flashlight began to blink erratically. The temperature plummeted. Then, as he later told investigators, he heard the unmistakable sound of breathing, directly behind him. When he turned, he saw no one. But that was only the beginning. Section 13, Forbidden Knowledge in the Star Pact Theory. As more reports of unexplained phenomena emerged from Tema, the narrative surrounding Nabonidus began to shift from eccentricity to cosmic obsession. A small group of scholars began reviving a long-dismissed theory whispered in the deepest corners of Near Eastern academia, the Star Pact hypothesis. According to this controversial idea, Nabonidus had made a covenant with an entity or force not of this world, a celestial intelligence, in exchange for esoteric knowledge. This theory stemmed from an obscure Babylonian cuneiform tablet discovered in 1892, long archived and forgotten in the British Museum. It spoke cryptically of a king who looked to the stars and was answered by the Watchers of Flame. For decades, scholars interpreted it as metaphorical, a poetic homage to astrology. But in light of recent finds, researchers like Dr. Hala Kadim from the University of Mosul began to argue otherwise. She pointed to the mysterious spiral glyphs uncovered at both the Tema and Sippar sites, symbols not matching any known Babylonian, Assyrian, or Sumerian system, that repeated in precise astronomical patterns. They appeared to mimic the orbital paths of stars invisible to the naked eye, including Sirius B, a white dwarf not discovered until the 19th century. How, she asked, could a king from 500 BC encode data requiring modern telescopic technology? By early 2023, Dr. Hala Kadim's findings were gaining traction in independent academic circles and among fringe theorists. Her papers, published online, quickly attracted millions of views. But just as her momentum peaked, her research was scrubbed from several university servers, and her personal website went offline. Journalists attempting to contact her were met with silence, and her colleagues claimed she had taken a sudden leave of absence, location unknown. Then came the stories of others who had worked on or near the Tima excavation. A satellite technician employed by a private geoscience firm disappeared after reporting anomalies beneath the buried Ziggurats Foundation. 2 Sudanese field researchers, both under contract with UNESCO, were found dead under mysterious circumstances near the excavation site, officially ruled accidental dehydration, despite weather data showing mild conditions. The Sudanese government, already under internal political strain, tightened access to the area. Military checkpoints surrounded Nuri, the ancient necropolis, and drone flights were banned. International media outlets attempted to probe the restrictions but were denied entry or had their gear confiscated. A BBC crew was expelled after filming within 5 kilometers of the dig. Meanwhile, whispers continued. Former workers at the Nuri site described auditory anomalies, persistent hums, impossible to record on devices. Equipment would randomly shut down. Glyphs flickered on walls, only visible to the naked eye, never on film. One worker, who fled to Kenya and gave an anonymous interview, claimed he saw a beam of violet light escape the tomb one night, bending upward into the sky. He broke down mid-interview and refused to speak further. Back in the academic world, a growing chorus began to ask if Nabonidus did, in fact, possess forbidden knowledge. Had we accidentally reopened a cosmic door that was meant to stay sealed? As the modern world inches further into the unknown, sending satellites into deep space, decoding the genome, and flirting with artificial intelligence, an ancient voice echoes from beneath the sands of Sudan. That voice may belong to Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon. But was he merely a forgotten monarch? Or something else? Let's retrace the evidence. A king who vanished from Babylon to live in the desert for a decade, unheard of. A tomb, buried deep beneath a Nubian pyramid, far from his empire. Carvings that defy Mesopotamian symbolism, spirals, faceless beings, and cosmic diagrams that resemble star charts from modern astronomy. The glyphs recovered at Nuri bear a disturbing resemblance to those found in other ancient sites, the Nazca lines of Peru, the megalithic temples of Malta, and the underground cities of Derinkuyu in Turkey. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries, yet linked by strange